We're back. So, with the NFL training camp about to get started underway, and the Hall of Fame game actually being in less than a month on August 4th, which it doesn't seem right. It seems like that the Hall of Fame game should still be like months and months away, but fortunately, that's not the case, and that NFL football, despite the preseason being just horrid, awful content, it's still technically NFL football, and that's less than a month away, only a couple weeks now. And I figured this would be a good time to preview the rest of the AFC North and just kind of how the Browns fit into that picture, where they kind of the piece they play in the puzzle that is the AFC North this year. So we're going to preview the other three teams very briefly, and then just kind of do a general discussion, starting with the last year's division winners, the Cincinnati Bengals. They went 10-7 last year, which isn't an incredible record, but they did go on to have an underdog run to the Super Bowl. Obviously, that's about as good as you can get without actually winning the Super Bowl for the AFC North champions. So that 10-7 record does kind of disguise their postseason success a little bit. As far as their additions in free agency and the offseason, they probably addressed one of their biggest offensive needs, which was that offensive line. It's been pretty crummy for the past 2 years. Last year, it kind of proved that maybe you don't need the best offensive line to go all the way to the Super Bowl, but the year before they saw the flip side of that, where Joe Burrow gets sacked one too many times. He has to get major surgery on his legs, and you never want that for your franchise quarterback. So it's good on the Bengals front office to go out there and invest in their offensive linemen with Lyle Collins, Alex Kappa, and Ted Karras. I think that's how you pronounce it. It's an oddly spelled name. One of the more recent developments with the Bengals is that Jesse Bates was given the franchise tag, and he says he's not playing under it. They haven't been able to negotiate a new long-term deal. That negotiation process has been very contentious between the Bengals and Jesse Bates. And Jesse Bates is obviously a huge piece on a defense that was seen as overperforming last year. Maybe this year they, come back down to reality. And if Jesse Bates isn't even a part of that, then it might be tough sledding for the defense last year. But I think overall that the Bengals should be fine as long as Joe Burrow and the receiving core are back, as long as Joe Mixon can thrive even more under an improved offensive line. Last year they seemed to be a team that was able to outscore their problems on defense, and I think Jesse Bates probably does eventually play under the franchise tag if he's not moved, which I don't think the Bengals want to move him anytime soon. I think overall the Bengals should be definitely a contender for the AFC North. I mean, you go to the Super Bowl, even though a 10-7 record isn't huge. If you're defending AFC champions in general, then I think you should definitely be a front runner for your division. Moving on to the Baltimore Ravens, they went 8-9 last season, so obviously they did not make the playoffs, but I do believe that an 8-9 record is still pretty commendable considering just the injury hell that they went through. Pretty much their entire secondary, their entire running back room, and I think Lamar Jackson did have to sit out a good bit of their games. Speaking of Lamar Jackson, he has not signed a contract extension with the Ravens yet. There's a lot of rumblings that the Deshaun Watson deal that was handed out, Lamar Jackson wanting a contract that is similar. The Baltimore Ravens may be disagreeing, although there hasn't really been an official word on what has been offered to him, if anything. Lamar Jackson not having an agent, and I think him and his mom kind of work out all of his contracts. Maybe that has slowed up the process a little bit, although I wouldn't imagine that Lamar would accept a deal he doesn't want, whether he has an agent representing him or not. And I don't think an agent is going to represent his interests better than he feels like he would himself represent an interest. Otherwise, he would have hired one by now. But one of the main concerns in Baltimore, or at least what I think would be if you're a Ravens fan, is that wide receiver room is pretty gross. And that was even before, even with Hollywood Brown and Sammy Watkins, that wasn't exactly a world-beating wide receiver room. And you traded Hollywood Brown to Arizona for a first-round pick, and you lose Sammy Watkins in free agency. That wide receiver room looks gross. So even if Lamar Jackson does end up signing, a big long-term deal with fully guaranteed money, and he's the Ravens quarterback for the next, 5 or 6 years, or however long they want to sign him for, who's he going to throw the ball to? I know they have wide receivers there that aren't, their names in the league, but nothing too huge. Who do they even have? Let me see. I mean, looking at their roster, what like their best wide receiver right now is maybe Rashad Bateman. Uh, if that's not a guy I would want headlining my wide receiver room if on the Browns, that's for sure. But the Ravens still have, I mean, they have a decent team. They're going to be much better than they were last season just by virtue of actually fielding the NFL team that they put together and not having a billion injuries. I get, Mark Andrews probably does help alleviate that receiving pressure from that wide receiver room, but not by a whole bunch. Mark Andrews is still he's only one guy, he's one tight end. He's not going to make up for the deficiencies of that wide receiver core all by himself. And then last and certainly least, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers, who finished 9-7-1 last season. They lost in the wild card to the Kansas City Chiefs. In fact, saying that they lost in the wild card round is an understatement. They were pretty much destroyed by a team that actually deserved to be in the playoffs. I think that 7th seed that they added to the wild card has probably been the worst competitive thing they've done to the playoffs in my lifetime, at least. It's probably made the NFL more money because there's more games and there's more stuff they can advertise. So it's probably been very lucrative for NFL and these, TV companies or whatever. But as far as watching it on the field, I think there's only been one good 2 versus 7 seed matchup, and that was probably the Bills and the Colts a couple years ago when the Colts had Phillip Rivers as their quarterback. But besides that, it's just been, what I remember, it's just been awful games to watch. But back to the Steelers. Obviously, the biggest question there is, are any of their quarterbacks any good? You have former MVP Mitch Trubisky. I think Mason Rudolph is still there. And, rookie draft pick Kenny Pickett in the first round. They lost Juju Smith-Schuster to Kansas City, but they did draft George Pickens out of Georgia. So maybe they see him replacing him in that wide receiver role. As far as the defensive side of the ball, I think the Steelers, unfortunately, are very still much elite. And adding Miles Jack as a linebacker to a linebacking core with Devin Bush just makes them all the more better. TJ Watt is, still a beast, still deserves to be the highest paid defensive end in the league in my book. A perennial defensive player of the year candidate. I think that defense is going to be just fine. I think, the issues arrive on the offense. Are any of their quarterbacks any good? Do they get any production from their wide receivers? Chase Claypool, Mapletron is obviously a receiving threat. Deontay Johnson has done some things, but besides that, what is there really? Najee Harris is a pretty good running back, but I don't know. I don't think they've upgraded the offensive line position that much to where they're going to give him much help. And who knows if he's able to, fill that void all by himself. He looked pretty all right with a pretty mediocre offensive line last year. So maybe they're just hoping that Najee Harris makes some magic happen again. I think the Steelers are kind of in a rerun of where they were last year, because while they still technically had Big Ben, he was kind of a fossil, definitely a shadow of his former self. They didn't really have a decent answer to the quarterback position there, and they were able to technically tread water enough to make a playoff spot. So maybe they don't need all-world quarterback play. They just need that defense to be what they are, and they're capable of giving any offense in the league trouble for 60 minutes of a football game. And I think in the NFL, that's what you need. You don't necessarily need a defense that every time goes out there and holds an opponent to 10 points, because you're not going to get that. But you need a defense that is capable of doing that, in one game. Maybe not over the course of a whole season, but for one game, this Steelers defense is definitely capable of suffocating an offense. And I think any offense, even the more high-powered ones in the league. So, I mean, if their defense stayed healthy, I know they had some injury issues last year with some of their playmakers, some of their pass rushers, and if that defense stays healthy, they could just be just as dangerous as they were last year. But their question marks come in, can they get any sort of running game going consistently? Can the quarterbacks do anything? Is Kenny Pickett any good? Who knows? And if he's not, does Mitch Trubisky and even Mason Rudolph, do they have what it takes to lead this team to the playoffs? I tend to think they don't, but Mitch Trubisky is one of these players that maybe he's a diamond in the rough, and the Bears just messed him up so bad that they weren't able to unlock the first round potential that he had. So as far as where the Browns kind of fit in all of this, it's really difficult to kind of predict how the Browns will perform this season, because again, we still don't know how long Deshaun Watson is going to be out for. Is it going to be an indefinite suspension? Is it going to be a 12? Is it going to be 4 games, 8 games? Is it going to be like a 6 to 8, but then they're going to appeal and it's going to be 4? There's like crap that gets flung out about what's going to happen with this Deshaun Watson case every day. Mike Florio is writing a different opinion. It seems like every half hour. I think today he released 2 different stories about, the suspension could be anywhere from 2 to 8 games, which is like saying I could live anymore from like I'll be alive 5 to 70 years from now. There's a huge difference between 2 games and 8 games. It's ridiculous. And then I think I just saw something he wrote about how the Browns are bracing for an 8-game suspension, which means he doesn't have any info. It's just that, one guy in the Browns front office might say that Deshaun Watson could get 8 games. It's a little ridiculous. But overall, I think if the Browns have Deshaun Watson for a significant amount of the season, or even maybe half the season, then I think they could be a candidate to go out and grab this division. Again, I know the Bengals are the current AFC champions. Joe Burrow is there. They have a very good offensive young core. But if you're the Browns, you hope to be competitive for this division now. And, if you're not, then it's kind of a failure of a season, and it kind of puts the whole future of the Browns in doubt, as people are already kind of doubting their future as of this moment. I'm going to end this video off by talking about something that's kind of a little bit of an oddity, probably a non-issue, but the Browns' 4th-round defensive tackle pick, Perrion Winfrey, still hasn't signed his contract yet. He's the only Browns draft pick that hasn't signed. There are other such cases. I think the Ravens pick, David Ojabo, hasn't signed his contract yet. Matt Corral for the Panthers hasn't signed his contract yet. So it's not like Perrion Winfrey is like an odd duck here. He's an odd duck in the Browns' room. But as far as league-wide goes, there are some notable names who still haven't signed their draft contracts yet. I got most of my info on this from a story by Thomas Moore at Dogs by Nature at the Browns SB Nation website. I'll provide a link to that article in the description if you want to check that out. Winfrey, like I said, picked in the 4th round. Apparently there's been no reportings of any like ill will on either side. Apparently the negotiations aren't, they're not getting contentious, or nobody's getting sour grapes or anything. They just haven't come together on a contract yet. I know Thomas Moore mentioned something about Dameon Pierce's $25,000 workout bonus, another 4th-round pick from Houston that he signed in his contract, and that maybe it's holding up maybe that's holding up a deal, maybe that he wants to get that $25K too, which usually I would say, oh, you're making so much money on these deals, what's $25,000? But if you're a rookie and you don't know how long your career is going to last, especially as a 4th-rounder, you gotta squeeze every dollar you can get. So I hope he gets signed before training camp. I hope he gets signed before they try to fully integrate him into the team. I don't think this is going to be an issue. This isn't being thought of as like this is definitely like a major issue. It's just something that's kind of weird. The Browns have like 40-some million in cap space for this year, so it's not like they're trying to save pennies by not signing him. It's just a little odd that he hasn't signed, but it shouldn't be too big of a thing. So if you've watched this video, I'd like to say thank you. Let me know in the comments if you disagree with any of my takes, if you think that a certain team in the AFC North is going to exceed expectations, or maybe if they're going to be much worse than anticipated. Make sure to like and subscribe if you like the video and you'd like to see more. Thank you for watching again, and I will see you at the next one.